In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Hello, 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 hello. Ryan Roxie here, and welcome to another live stream episode of In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie. I'm your host, and welcome. Today is one of those shows. I'm telling you, man, I did my research. I'm excited that our guest is here. I'm excited you guys are all here. I'm going to wait a couple seconds while y'all get into the chat and while you all get into sort of settle down and get in your places if you want to. If you are listening to us on the Apple Podcast or Spotify platforms, please make your way on over to YouTube Live or Facebook Live and hit that subscribe button right now if this is your first time joining us, for sure, because this is one of those shows you will want to watch and rewatch again. Because over here on In the Trenches, as you know, on the show, we invite not only our guests, but we invite our listeners to dive deep into the trenches and find out what drives these artists and entertainers and keeps them inspired and creative. So today, we are going to go beyond what we see in just the music videos or on the t-shirts or whatever you want to call it. We are going to go beyond that. And we're going to do our best to discover the many different musical layers residing in our special guest. So I'm going to welcome right now Alice Cooper, alumni bassist, as well as Winger frontman. Please welcome to In the Trenches, Kip Winger. Hello, Kip.
Hey, Ryan. How are you, man? Thanks for having me.
That's my biggest introduction I've ever. I actually wrote that introduction down for you.
That's very nice of you. I appreciate it.
Thank God. I can't believe it. Well, welcome to In the Trenches, Mr. Kip Winger, and I appreciate you waking up kind of early. You're on the West Coast. You're somewhere undisclosed place in Arizona, and you said there would be alarm clocks and chime bells ringing throughout the interview.
Yes.
Where are you?
I'm at my mom's house in the high mountains of Arizona, and she has a bunch of grandfather clocks that will be going off, so it's kind of nice. And yeah, I'm up here visiting, and there's a dog behind me. You probably can't see him. Nelson.
Well, we might hear him. You know what?
You might hear him barking.
Our producer, Vic, has a dog as well, and he sort of makes an appearance. Stanley makes an appearance once in a while on In the Trenches as well. But today we are here to sort of, there was so much research I went into this interview because I just didn't want to do the same old, okay, let's talk about Winger. Let's talk about the albums, because you guys have had a huge career with just that band. But your musical career has gone way deeper than that. And the big story for me the takeaway that I'm going for is that of all the rockers that I know that, started off classically trained and then became rockers. You read about it all the time, whether it's Randy Rhoads or Edward Van Halen. They start off learning classical music, but then tend to move towards rock and rollers and transcend into that world. You did the exact opposite, and you're the only guy that I know that has actually started off as a rock and roller, then sort of got into classical music through ballet and through dance, and then basically became a professional music composer. And I find that very interesting and intriguing.
Well, thanks to you for doing your research, because most people write in interviews that I grew up, having done classical music and then turned to rock, but you got it right. I was self-taught until, I didn't read an orchestral score until I started at 35. So, but I did do some studying early on. I grew up in a band with my two brothers, and we were completely self-taught, right? So it was mostly a three-piece incarnation of the band, and we would do Grand Funk and James Gang and all the great three-piece. There I am. Right
there's a picture of one of your first bands that you have, because you grew up in a musical household, right? You grew up with jazz musicians as your parents, and then sort of rock and rollers with your brothers. So was that one of the first incarnations of rock bands you were in?
That is. And so my parents brought home instruments at Christmas one time, and they brought a guitar for my older brother, who was 4 years older than me, and drums for my middle brother. And they weren't sure what I wanted to play yet, because I think I was about 5. And they brought a microphone, and
Is that a thing for a band? If you're never sure what you want to play, is just give them the bass
and a tambourine. Oh, well, no, I wanted to play the bass, actually. I was really into it. And McCartney and all that stuff. And of course, we were all into the Beatles, right? So,
of course. Now you look at that picture, you can see it. Who is the fourth Beatle? Do you remember who that was, or the fourth member of your band right there? Looks like Dave.
Well, yeah, no, that's Peter Fletcher on my right. I'm looking in the screen on right. That's Peter Fletcher, we did an album. The drummer's Nate and me, and the guy in the back is my oldest brother, Paul. But Blackwood Creek was comprised of the three: Peter Fletcher, Nate, and myself. So, my brother left for a while, and we played as a three-piece for years until I was about 20, and then I moved to New York and met Reb Beach shortly after that. And I met Reb actually before I joined Alice. So
I think you met Reb probably in the early 80s, probably the 83 or something like that. Am I correct with that info?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
We met at Atlantic Studios. In Denver, I met Bo Hill, and Bo produced my band with my brothers. At that time, it was all my brothers, and Fletcher had left. So, and then Bo went to New York, and I kind of followed him because he was my only connection to kind of the big time music business. And he produced Rat and became very successful.
Well, trust me, we have a little bit of a connection there together before we ever met officially, which was obviously being Alice Cooper's band at different times, but alumni, and we met at different shows. But we do have that New York connection because I lived in New York in the late 80s. You were signed to Atlantic Records. I think Jason Flom probably signed you, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. But I was signed with Atlantic Records as well. Do I have the label right at least?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So I want to get back into the New York stories a little bit later on, but I still want to go. With this segment, it's like you got to go back to move forward, and I'm really interested in the history because you grew up in a musical family. You're playing in rock bands at night, like you're 16 years old. You're playing at rock bands at night, but during the day, at an early age, you discover dance. You discover, you're doing martial arts, but then it was dance like a natural sort of, progression to that, or what?
It was, like you said, thank you for doing your homework. My brother and I were taking this martial art called Kajukenbo, and I had a girlfriend at the time who wanted to take ballet, and none of her friends would do it with her. And she mentioned it to me, and I was like, I'll do it. Let's try it. Because I was all stretched out and stuff, and I could kick my leg over my head and stuff like that. And so we went into a ballet studio, and I'll never forget when I walked in the ballet studio, I saw people holding their legs up like this, and I'd only seen Bruce Lee do that. Like no one else I knew could do that. But there was this amazing music flowing out of the doorways, and I'm looking in the door, seeing this thing, and I was totally like mesmerized by it. And so we started taking classes, and I just completely took to it like a duck to water. I was just completely into it from class one, and that was in Denver, early Denver.
You actually in a dance company? Because I know so little until this afternoon about ballet and stuff, and diving deep down like I did. Dance companies, were you actually in one in the Colorado area?
Okay, so in Colorado, and back in those days especially, there were very few men that took ballet, right? And so when, to do partnering, they need men, so they really were like into recruiting me, and it came very naturally to me. So I got recruited into this tiny little company, Colorado State Ballet, and there it
is. You'll hear that a lot. But back when we were growing up, because we're around the same age, we're around this. We obviously have the same musical influences as well. But who was the Russian ballet dancer? That was the hot dude that was like
Baryshnikov. Yeah.
Was it Baryshnikov?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Was he like? Was he any sort of like one of your influences when it came to that, or was that just one of those guys?
Well, Baryshnikov was the peak of it all. I mean, everybody saw Baryshnikov as the greatest dancer that ever lived, especially at the time. But
I think many people in the chat right now might have thought you were with the early Winger videos,
Wow.
because you gave them a run for their money. I guarantee you gave Baryshnikov a
That's
run
really,
for his money.
it's funny that you say that, because I was really into dancing, and I did do some performing, and I still take class to this day. I mean, I took a class about 8 months ago, or it was a while ago now with COVID. I still like to do it. It's great exercise, but I was really also very motivated by taking David Lee Roth to another level,
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
yeah,
absolutely. But whenever I picture anybody that's in shape, front man, and I think about it, I always picture that shot of David Lee Roth doing the splits over the drum riser, and everyone knows that shot when I'm talking about it. Vic, do you have that shot to bring up? No, you don't. Okay.
greatest front man of all. I mean, David Lee Roth was amazing, And so I thought, and then I would see Freddie Mercury in tights, and I thought, well, and Ian Anderson too, they were wearing tights and stuff. And I thought, man, I'm going to take this to another level. And, I was learning how to do all that stuff. And then I just put my bass on and did the same thing with my bass on,
There you go. You made just that little twist, and that became, well, maybe a blessing and a curse. You never know.
I took a lot of flack for it, dude. I mean, back in the day, it was like,
there
he is.
You know what? Our producer, Vic, give him a lot of cred, because we had this is just coming off the fly. And there you go, dude. You got that shot. I remember that shot. I went to a Van Halen concert. I think I went to Diver Down, and I remember that was the first time I honestly felt I might die at a concert, because it was way back before any social distancing, way back before it was just a sea of people moving back.
They were amazing, unbelievable. I never got to see them back in the day,
Really?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well,
I missed a lot of bands, dude. I missed a lot of bands. I didn't see a lot of my favorite acts.
Well, you were actually writing and playing with him, because you have that connection. And for those of you that are just joining us, we are hanging out here with Mr. Kip Winger from the front man of Winger, plus Alice Cooper, bassist alumni. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. But welcome to In the Trenches podcast. If you just joined us, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm moving on because of this relationship that you have with producer Beau Hill, because again, there is a connection with Beau Hill, and I think one of your first big breaks, it was writing a song for a band, very underrated band. And I love this band Kix out of Baltimore.
Totally.
And this album was called Midnight Dynamite. And I honestly, I did not know that you wrote a song on that album, and I turned it on this morning when I'm doing my research, and that was my favorite song on the album. To be honest with you, I think it was track 3, and it's Bang 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 Balls of Fire.
Wow!
And
awesome.
How did that experience all go down? Because you already knew Beau Hill from Colorado, but then you said you followed him to New York. Was Kix one of those bands that you just got in playing with or writing with?
No, man. Beau was very generous in helping me, kind of get somewhere. And he just called me one day and said, "Hey, do you have any songs? I'll pitch them for this band Kix." I think he produced Kix after Rat. After Rat hit, he was, kind of like the guy. Right. And he did a lot of producing after that. And
he did all the big Wingers albums. I mean, the first two, right? The
first two, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Nirvana hit right after the second album, and we were all gone. But
I always hear that from Reb Beach, because Reb Beach, again, another connection that we have. Reb Beach was my first touring guitar player that I got to play with in the Alice Cooper band in '96 when I first joined Alice Cooper. I think it was Reb's first stint with Alice Cooper as well. So you had obviously played before. You had played with Kane and Alice and on the Constrictor, and we're going to go into that in a little bit. But we're all sort of Alice Cooper alumni, and I just remember Reb always saying, Nirvana and a cartoon ruined my career. but at the same time, you know what? Reb Beach has had an illustrious career. He's gone on to play.
It's amazing with Reb. Night Ranger, Dokken, Alice Cooper, Whitesnake. I mean, he's got his couple solo albums. Winger.
course.
And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. He's a very humble guy, though. He doesn't carry it with him at all. It's kind of like he can't remember past the last gig he's done. So it's kind of
the thing is, like you said before, you met him before you were in Alice. Then you join Alice and you meet up with the other sort of 25% of Winger, which is Paul Taylor, another guy that I got to play with on the first couple tours. There's you and Alice joining him.
There's Alice, yep.
Now joining Alice Cooper
who's
band,
the guy in the background?
I don't know. I know him from somewhere.
He's the Russian bodyguard. Well, yeah. So, I mean, the thing about growing up in a band with my brothers and having gone through what it means to be in a band, I mean, there's definitely a thing there, and we were together for a long time since I was, I think we did my first professional gig when I was 8 years old. So when I met Reb and then I met Paul and Alice Cooper, I kind of knew that the chemistry would work just instinctively. And so when I met Paul, I was like, hey, I know this great guitar player back in New York, let's put this thing together. And Ken Mary was the drummer at the time, and actually Ken and Paul and I were thinking about doing something. We actually went to Colorado and recorded a few songs. Miles Away was one of them, actually.
Really?
And then it turned out when I went back to New York to build the first album with Reb, that we accidentally met Rod Morgenstein, who Reb was a huge Dregs fan. I'd never heard of him. And it was kind of like, well, we asked Rod to play on the album, and then Rod kind of joined the band very slowly. We asked him to do the album and then to do the video, and hey, would you tour? And then it kind of just gelled into being, the band that way, because Rod came. Yeah, exactly. Right there.
One of the first lineups. And, when you've already had this experience though, with Alice, you've already had basically some real touring experience, being on a big stage, working your show. Did you know, like, okay, I'm playing with Alice now, I'm playing with Beta, I'm getting to play in front of a lot of people, but I really need to do my thing? When did you realize it was time that I need to put my own band together? I'm going to front it.
It's interesting. I owe a lot to Kane Roberts, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Kane, for anybody that knows him, is a supremely insightful person. So Kane was the first one to recommend that I tell Alice I'd like to join, if they go touring, please, call me up, because I'd love to go on tour, which they did. And then I joined the band. And before I was in Alice Cooper, I was shopping like a solo album deal. And I was really into, Peter Gabriel and like all this British pop stuff. And right. This was 1985, and I had written, 100 songs in 1985 that all sound like I escaped from Duran Duran meets Peter Gabriel, super complicated. If you listen to the song In the Heart of the Young off the second album, I wrote that in 85, and that was kind of more representative of the stuff that I was writing, but it was even more drum machine-y and all this stuff. And so I got in the Alice Cooper, and it was all about touring, and I hadn't done live playing for a long time. Kane was like, it's not time to write. It's not your time to write right now. You should be thinking about touring. I was like, oh, wow, it's not my time to write. Okay, I can relax, and I'll just tour. I'm just going to think about touring. So I thought about touring. And then in doing that, I just sat back and watched. It was interesting to me because I had played all this super heavy music when I was 16 years old. I mean, I was playing all that stuff. And so then, I'm 26 years old in Alice thinking, wow, I already did this. This is completely in my blood. Megadeth opened for us, and Tesla and all these bands. I was thinking, man, I could put a band like this together. Like, I should be doing this. I was like, man, I know this killer guitar player, and I was telling Paul, like, let's do this, let's put this thing together, and that's how that happened. And so it all started formulating during that one Alice Cooper tour that I did. We did the Constrictor record, and it was that tour. And
you also did the Raise, but you recorded on the Raise Your Fist and Yell album.
Right. So they wrote the Raise Your Fist and Yell, of which I had a tiny little input on that with this weird classical thing called Gale.
Which is a precursor of what's to come, which is
kind
awesome.
of, yeah. And when I was in New York, before Alice Cooper, I did take some composition lessons from a guy named Edgar Grana, who I did a little bit of stuff, not a lot, but I did. I kind of could fake some counterpoint, stuff like that, but not really. Anyway, so I wrote that. Anyway, so I was touring, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to jump, because right now I feel like I might be able to put this together, and
there's my window.
And it's my window, totally.
Right. Well, I find it very cool and interesting that you give Kane Roberts that credit, because personally, my sort of insight is that you guys had more of a Step Brothers sort of movie, if you know the Will Ferrell and C. Thomas, that sort of relationship where it was a little bit could be contentious, but spurned on by a little bit of competitive, because he's a singer, he's a solo guy, you're a singer, you're even though you're not playing, you did play guitar, but bass is your primary
totally.
Instrument. There seems to be a spirited competition through there. And I think it's really cool that he actually motivated you to find that window.
Dude, Kane Roberts and I talk at least 3 times a week. I mean, we've been very, very close ever since.
So you're stepbrothers.
I mean, he was super encouraging, and I was a fan of his stuff too. I thought, guys, he's really talented dude, man. I mean, come on. And even right up to his last album, it's amazing stuff.
Yep.
And he's funny and very insightful and super intelligent. So when I need a good opinion, I call Kane, what do you think of this? And, he's always got something very valid and interesting to say, no bullshit. And
Kane's been on the podcast before. He's actually been on twice. We are debating whether to make him a regular member of the podcast, because he is so, like you say, no bullshit. That's the thing that Alice says about both of you guys. And it's a reoccurring theme is when he talks about your guys' sense of humor. He said that both Kane Roberts, the 2 funniest guys I ever toured with, this is Alice's words, 2 funniest guys I ever toured with, Kane Roberts and Kip Winger. And when they were on tour together, it was hilarity.
It was a blast. That's one thing I really missed. And when I left the band, I did sacrifice a lot there, because it was, it's a built-in headline act,
No doubt.
I mean, it's a cushy gig, man. And
Kip, I've been riding the coattails for how many years now?
Yeah, well, good for you, because I'm kind of like, I always think, God, I should have never got out of that band. I've done that a couple times where I sang for Alan Parsons too, and the scheduling didn't work so well, and I couldn't really maintain it. And I really, I regret not hanging into those great gigs. But
as we talk on. Yeah, but as we talk on your story, I think it validates what you're doing, because honestly, you are a true musician in every sense of the word, because with all this rock and roll going on in your life, you're playing, arenas, and then you have major success with your own band, Winger. At one point, you say, you know what really moves me and what my next musical journey is that clock. And it's also, and I think did you write that? Is that one of those classical pieces that you might have written?
No, it's diatonic. It's in a major scale. I do very few things in a major scale, but yeah.
So do I. If it's not in pentatonic, I ain't writing it. So the thing is, you're taking your musical journey, and this is where it gets interesting for me, to another level where you start educating. Like you said, you'd already done some classical training, but then you really dive into it and you start classically training yourself and start composing actual concertos and movements. And this is what drove you to that from playing rock and roll.
Right. So it goes back to ballet. When I heard the music from, dancing, Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, I was thinking Debussy, Ravel. I was thinking, who wrote this? I thought, because I'd written a lot of songs in my life, and I would always, how it is when you write songs. You get stuck and you're like, oh, what do I do? Same chords, where do I go now? And that used to happen to me a lot, actually. And you'd wait for the inspiration, or maybe the moment would happen that you would just happen to go, oh my God, now I have a bridge. Thank you. And I felt like, what these guys are writing this music, these giant 20-minute pieces and hour-long pieces, and they just seem to be flowing with endless amounts of inspiration. No, kind of repetitive monotony, and it sounds so inspired. I'm like, what is this? And I thought, so I listened a lot because I was touring so much. I didn't really have time, and to be honest with you, I didn't have the courage to go test myself, because I thought, well, that's a big dream, dude, but no one's ever going to actually play your music. I mean, I never actually believed that an orchestra would play my music. I mean, I didn't have that as a goal. I just had the goal of wondering if I could attempt to write it.
You could do it. Well, see, here's the difference between you and I. I watched Amadeus too, and I loved Amadeus. But you know what? I didn't friggin' learn the craft. You learn the entire craft, and you start composing this music, and then lo and behold, this gets recorded by,
I got lucky. I mean, it's funny how this all worked out, because when I danced and I heard the music, I was like, I want to write music for ballet. I want to write music and have people dance. And I met Christopher Wheeldon, who's a very famous choreographer from New York City Ballet. And when I wrote Ghosts, I sent him that piece and didn't hear from him for a long time. And then I got an email. I love this piece. I'd like to work on it with San Francisco Ballet. And that was very, very lucky. But up until then, I had studied, 10 years before I wrote that piece. So
how long, and I know that traditional music with verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out, or whatever formula you want to use, that's one way of doing it. But then with classical music, there's movements. So did you send them one movement or two movements, or what the hell is a movement for those of us in the chat and myself that don't have any idea?
Well, I mean, a movement is really just normally a big orchestral piece will come in 3 or 4 movements, sometimes 2. Modern composers maybe could write a concerto in 1 movement. You have to go back. It developed through starting in the 1600s. So classical music actually isn't a correct term if you want to get completely technical about it. Classical period was a certain period which entered into the Romantic period, which entered into the Impressionistic period, which entered into the modern period. And
you're kind of always influenced by Impressionist.
I'm kind of like a post-Impressionist modernist guy. I don't love music written before 1900. My favorite music is starting with Ravel and kind of going up until now. And mostly, to be honest with you, I try only to listen to to study and listen to modern composers, because there's too much emphasis put on the Beethovens and Mozarts. I mean, to me, the music is great, but it's very boring because it's not harmonically challenging or anything like that. So postmodern,
impressionist, all those terms that you just use, you know what? from going from hair metal to grunge, it's all relative, isn't it?
You know what? It actually is. And the only people ask me, like, how do you make the leap from rock to classical? And I'm like, it's not actually that big of a leap, because if you think about producing a pop song, you'll have drums, guitars will fill this area in the spectrum. You'll have a bass, you'll have vocals, you'll have background vocals, you'll have some keyboards and stuff like that. Yeah. And if you think of orchestra, you just have to get in the mindset of the string section is the heart of the thing. Then you have winds to give you some accents here. Brass, if you really want to push some stuff or do some interesting things with that sound. And then percussion that drives,
So this is some footage that Vic's putting up of when you guys were recording. It might have been ghosts. It might have been conversations with Nijinsky. But it was definitely, I can see the layers forming right there that you're talking about.
Yeah, right. So there's 4 sections of the orchestra: strings, winds, brass, and percussion. And within those 4 sections, there's different, there's first violin, second, third, fourth, first, second violins, violas, cellos, and bass. So there's 5 sections of the strings. With the winds, there's generally 4 sections, unless you get into specialized instruments like contrabassoon or something like this, or bass clarinet, or
as we would call 12-string bass.
Exactly. 4 sections of winds, 4 sections of horns, and percussion, kind of how you hear it. So, and especially what's cool about writing it now is anything goes. So it's really only that it's like learning a foreign language. You have to just understand how they think. And it took me a long time to do that. I mean, did you ever go in, you remember Spencer's books?
Yes, I remember
the super hippie shop.
I remember Spencer's Gifts.
Spencer's Gifts.
That's where I got my lava lamp from.
Well, so exactly. So they always had these like 3D pictures in there that you had to like look at for a minute. It's 2D, and then all of a sudden you see the 3D. Right.
Uh-huh.
That's very
classical.
That was very much how my experience went with learning how to compose for orchestra. It was like beat my head against the wall for about maybe 8 to 9 years before I really was like, whoa, I get it, And I remember the moment that I got it. And actually, to be honest with you, the moment I got it was after Ghosts, and Ghosts had become a successful ballet and stuff. The moment I got it was I was studying with this guy named Richard Danielpour, who you should look up his music. He's an amazing composer. It was my 50th birthday, and I went to Vienna to just kind of watch him work with this Viennese orchestra for a piano concerto that he had written. And I watched all the rehearsals, and then I watched the performance of the piece, and I was sitting in the audience, and it just happened. It was like, I get it. And then that's when I started working on Nijinsky.
And these are pieces that you're working on that are giving you actually more. I mean, you've had big success already in Winger, but this is giving you number ones in music.
It's interesting. I had a number 1 album with this, and was nominated for a Grammy for the composition of Nijinsky.
That was in 2016, right? There you go. You're next to at least you're at a Grammy party. I know that because
it was actually 2017.
17. Okay.
And that was shocking. And the company I was in was shocking. And I was. It's a strange story, dude, because like I don't recommend it. It's very torturous to write orchestral music. It's really it's not fun like sitting down with Reb Beach. That's fun. We have fun.
For the stories. Just for the stories in themselves, of course. Yeah.
Just going back, just a brief recap, it was 1996, and I was living in Santa Fe, and the grunge thing had hit, and all the 80s guys were out of a gig. You really couldn't play anywhere. I mean, I had a few acoustic gigs. I did a solo album, and I got a few gigs. I did a Borders Books tour actually.
You were one of the first guys that I remember doing those solo acoustic coffee house type tours. And, that was a little bit groundbreaking, because now, of course, these days, anybody would kill for a gig like that. I've got one down, and I'm traveling 6 hours over the next weekend just to play one, in the south of Sweden. But yeah, so you were doing those.
Well, it was the only thing I could do, and the only gig we tried an interesting thing. I was working with this Japanese manager named Aichi Naito, who had originally let me and Reb use the studios to record the first album with, and he managed an artist named Kitaro, and so I worked with him on my first solo album. And
don't tell me that Kitaro played Guitaro, did he?
No.
That was a guess. All right. But it was a shot and I missed.
We thought, well, what if you play at 4 in the afternoon at Borders Books? So I went out and did about 30 Borders Bookstore tours and played to about 10 people, dude. And so it was like from the second album where we were headlining. Well, we were never a bona fide headliner like 10,000, but we pulled maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people.
No doubt.
During the second album. And then like the Pull record came out after that, which did okay. And then after that, it was like totally gone, and I was playing to 10 people. So during that time, I was promoting the first solo record, and I found a guy at University of New Mexico to study what you would normally go through university to study, like counterpoint, harmony, and all that kind of stuff. Did that for a while, moved to Nashville, and studied with another guy named Michael Curick, who got me through Ghosts. And my thing was always, when I was a kid, my dad gave me this book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which was a kind of like the God.
I want to get that one. Vic, do you have a picture of that book up? Can you put it up, please?
That was the godfather of Tony Robbins and all the positive thinker guys, but it was
of course.
But it was but it was really the real deal. And in the book was all about how if you want to achieve something, like, shadow yourself after somebody that's better and go find mentors and all this kind of stuff. So that was always like my philosophy, was always find somebody better than you.
You went to a lot of places for music. You went to study a lot of different places, because you did travel, even though you didn't have the time. You were too busy playing, to 10 people at Borders Books to actually join a music school. So you're traveling here, going to New York as well, and studying.
After in 2010, I think it was, I met Richard Danielpour, and he called me actually, and he said, I think you should come study with me. But you have to commit to 1 year, and you have to come once a month to New York for a 2-hour lesson. And I was like, I'm in. So I flew to New York every month for a 2-hour lesson from Richard. And
I struggled to drive an hour out to the Valley to take a vocal lesson with Ron Anderson, which I'm sure you probably did too.
Actually, I took from a guy named Maitland Peters in New York when I was like 20 years old. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But so, it's all time management, dude. It's really just about how am I going to manage my time? Because my whole thing in life has always been, okay, I'm on my deathbed. What am I going to be thinking when I look back? Did I do the thing I wanted to do? Did I get it done? And so, I kind of like project into the future, like, okay, what am I going to do now to make sure that when I'm on my deathbed, I went, okay, I did it,
That's actually really inspiring advice, because you should. Every person out there has something that they do great. And if they can find that thing that they do great, and they become multiple things through your life that you do good, and just keep achieving that goal, then you're going to have a very fulfilled life at the end of the road.
Totally.
And have you ever, just by talking with you all this time, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, clock.
You're going to say it's 9:45.
It is every 15 minutes.
I love it. For those of you,
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna really quickly say that you are listening to In the Trenches podcast. For all of you that have been hanging out in the chat, thank you so much for viewing the live stream. If you're watching on and listening on Apple, you can't watch on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. Make your way on over to the YouTube channel and make sure you to subscribe, because we are with, of course, bassist, but now moving on to musical composer. Hold on. I have the initials here. CF, Kip Winger. Now I'll put that out there. I know what the CF stands for. Was the CF put there as a musical composer for sort of composer cred, or is it rock cred, or what is the? I know what CF is. It's part of your name. Of course.
No, it is my name, Charles Frederick Winger. Kip was always a nickname, and I just. I added the initials on my second solo album, actually. Why did I do it? I guess it was kind of a inner division from where I was to where I'm going,
So instead of Prince doing his symbol, you did your initials.
Kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that.
But you had to keep Kip in there because I think Kip is such a, it's immediately acceptable name. It's original. And people, they don't forget Kip.
It's interesting because when I knew I was going to have classical performances, I thought, should I be Charles Winger, because it sounds more legit. But nobody knew me that way, and I found that, like for instance, San Francisco Ballet wanted to use the fact that I was in rock. Okay, this is an interesting thing. When I didn't realize that my background in rock would actually help me in the classical world. I thought it would hurt me, but and I was very intimidated by classical musicians because, oh my God, they're great and they've studied all this stuff and they know so much more than I do.
They wear tuxedos.
Totally. And so I thought, well, if I change my name to my real name, maybe that's a little more legit. But the truth is that classical musicians are very open-minded and they want new things. They want a story and all that. And I had a story. So I quickly realized that being Kip Winger was fine. I'm not a person that I'm pretty shy and I don't believe in everything I've done. I think that the things that I do always could be improved upon. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't really have an ego about any of that stuff. I'm always reading a Honegger score or somebody that kicks my ass thinking, oh my God, I should have done that. That's where I come from. But I wanted to make a point from earlier about time management and people's goals and bucket lists and all this kind of stuff. Art comes in many forms. It's not just music and dance and sculpture and painting and stuff. You could be a great real estate agent and make it your art, or anything that you do. You could be a waiter at a restaurant, and it can be an art. There's an art in everything. And so finding that, kind of looking for the elegance in your day-to-day life is a huge thing.
I like that. I saw a question just because I'm curious myself. That came up a couple questions ago. How did you get the name Kip? And we must have mental telepathy because Vic, I wanted that question because I'm looking at Charles Frederick. That's the CF, Kip Winger. Where does Kip come into it?
My mom just started calling me Kip when I was born. It was a total nickname. She just said, you were just Kip. It's just like
a jazz musician to call someone Kip, isn't it? And you said your parents were jazz. Yo, Kip, what's up?
So. Totally. Yeah. It's just I've been called Kip my whole life, and just kind of a nickname that stuck.
Wow. So one of your biggest classical pieces is actually inspired by ballet again, because again, we have that intertwining convergence of dance and music. And that was the Conversations with Nijinsky that you did.
Yes.
And I'm just very curious about, what was the influence and what was the sort of admiration? Because I actually went down and did my research, folks, about Nijinsky. He was a Polish, he raised in Russia, but he was a Polish dancer, one of the best of his time, but his career sadly cut short by schizophrenia, right? And did that have anything to do with the inspiration behind all this, or how did it become conversations?
It's interesting. I was writing this piece of music, and oftentimes when I'm composing classical music, the more I do it, the more okay, so how do I say this? If you play the piano, you'll get carried away by the sound of the piano, and it will actually inhibit the ideas in your mind. So what I do is I'll hear something and I'll try to sketch something out at the piano, and then I'll walk away as fast as I can. And oftentimes, if I come up with something cool, I write at the computer and I'll loop something and I'll just be dancing around. I'll be like jumping around the room and doing ballet moves because my initial inspiration was to write music for ballet. And one day, and I was reading a book, I was reading several books about Nijinsky at the time. I was reading the diaries of Nijinsky, and as I was writing the piece, I mean, I had a delusion or an illusion or whatever you want to call it, but I sensed him standing right there. I was like, oh my God, it's you. and I thought to myself, wow, I'm having conversations with Nijinsky. And I thought, oh my God, that's what this is. That's how that was born.
That's the title right there.
Yeah.
Wow. And from that, I mean, it's gave you a lot of cred, obviously, and more accolades, more awards with that as well.
Being nominated for a composition Grammy was really unbelievable, because that's not an easy club. I was invited to be a judge the next year, and they were mean. I mean, in a good way. They were, but
it's like 8 Simon Cowells or something like that.
More than that, about 25 of them, and they do not let stuff pass. I mean, it was really astounding. So I feel super honored to be in that club. And I don't know, man. I just finished my first symphony. I got a commission from Nashville Symphony to do an album of my music. They commissioned me for 2.
Congratulations! Is that can that be breaking news? Can that be my headline? Could that be my soundbite, or what? Did that just happen?
No, it's been for a while. That news has been out for a while. But
can we pretend?
there it is. Giancarlo and June, the guy, the Oriental guy next to me, and Giancarlo there. June's the first violinist. I'm writing a concerto for him, and I just finished there he is, Giancarlo. He said, "Come on, Kip, what do you want to write?" I was like, and he goes, "Come on, what do you want to write? You want to write your first symphony?" And I was thinking to myself, no, because that was just too much of a daunting task. And then I started thinking, wow, my first symphony, oh my God, could I actually do that? So I emailed him back and said, you know what, I'm going to try that. And it took me, I finished it in, I think, January or February. It took me about maybe a year and a half to write it.
And this is what I'm most impressed with, is that you're able to sort of juggle the two, because you're not just writing symphonies as well. You're carrying the torch of Winger. Winger is still touring. Winger is still recording, and Winger is actually putting out a new record.
Yeah.
And so at basically the same time, because the time frame you're telling me, so you're able to do both. Is it one day? Do you have to just think in a differently total head, or do they kind of converge?
You know what? Someone's calling.
Well, that's okay. You told them it was an hour, and we've been going, but hopefully it's okay. We keep going.
We're good. Yeah, we're good. So that was very difficult at first. It was like, oh, how do I do this? But I did a trick. So everybody at home can try this trick. If you have a couple things that you want to try, I bought these baseball caps, and
You literally wear a different hat.
and I wear a different hat.
I love it.
And I thought, okay, I'm the classical guy now. And you focus. And then, let's do winger. And you focus on that. And it's just about time management. It's like, okay, from these 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours, I'm only doing this. And you develop individual skills. I mean, and I'm 59, dude. So, I mean,
you look healthy. Music keeps you young, folks. That's another thing. Or just doing things that you love keeps you youthful, I believe.
Yeah. And I just, it's that thing about on my deathbed, I'm like, did I get it done? To be honest with you, at one point I wanted to drop rock and only do classical, but now I'm like, I have so much more fun doing the rock music, because to fit into the classical world, it's such a narrow window. You have to like get your music through this tiny little hole. It has to harmonically be relevant, but it can't be repeating. You can't be faking it. You can't be copying. And, it's extraordinarily difficult to find that place, and you have to have a voice.
Sounds like it's the exact opposite of the pop music world, where it has to be repetitive. It has to be exactly like everybody else. And it just, wow.
So I'm kind of like, I'm going to do this album with the Nashville Symphony. I have one other project I want to do, and then I kind of just want to rock. To be honest with you, man. I mean, I want to do a push with Winger over the next years, and just really put that all back together as well. When COVID, kind of when we'll see what happens when live.
Who knows what the new normal is? I think
exactly.
All these different things is actually quite. It's a good use of your time, because you don't know what is going to be the future. So you might as well, maybe the only thing we are allowed to listen to is classical music a year from now. Maybe that's the only type of live performance we can actually see.
Oh my God. I don't know. There's 60 people in the orchestra, so they'd all have to be, I don't know.
Surround, maybe
you said you're doing an acoustic gig. You're going down to do?
Yeah, but Sweden's a different animal. Sweden, of all the countries, there is a law in Sweden that's 49 people and below, and I've never had a problem at an acoustic show of breaking that sold out over 49. But it's just kind of a small venue. But like I said, I'm taking, because I want to play in front of people as much as I do.
I've toured all over that area, solo acoustic. Now I have a percussionist, but I did it without a percussionist, and I'd do it to, 10 to 50, 100 people, whatever it was. And they are great audiences. I mean, talk about good listeners. Unbelievable.
Well, our audience is great here and in the trenches too. And in the chat, that they're always chiming in with really great quotes. I appreciate you guys hanging out for as long as you have. We are hanging out with Mr. Kip Winger from the band Winger, as well as Alice Cooper alumni. And I mean, there's so many things I want to get into before I get back into these different segments that we have, where we actually have questions from the chat that Vic has been collecting. Sure. But I just one thing before, because this is another sort of avenue that you've gone. You've done rock, you've done classical, you've converged classical and ballet because of your love for dance, but then you've actually moved on to doing musicals. And you've done a musical with Damian Gray called Get Jack. And where did that idea come from? And what possessed you to say, you know what, now I want to write a musical? Because it's really interesting. And if we can play, maybe first to give the folks just a little taste of what it is, let's play a little bit, Vic, of Get Jack, and then we can talk about it.
My darlings are coming to get Jack. My darlings are coming to get Jack. My darlings are coming to get Jack. My darlings are coming to get Jack.
So what is that?
Right. So I had written rock albums, solo albums. They're more experimental, classical pieces that were fully instrumental with, 20 minutes long. And I thought to myself, it's 9 o'clock. This is going to be a big chimer. we're gonna. There's
It'd
gonna
be great if confetti dropped and every time the clock went off. I love it.
The clock's gonna pound out 10 pounds here because it's 10 o'clock. I mean, can you hear me while I talk over the clock?
I can hear you fine. I can hear you fine. I just got this hankering to listen to Clock Strikes 10 by Cheap Trick right now. That's all.
So I said to myself, well, I want to write a bigger piece, a bigger genre, and it's so I want to do an opera or a musical, and I want to write for singers that aren't me, and so I kind of do what I always do. I throw my net out into the universe and see what comes back to me. Like, okay, universe, I want to write an opera. What's it? Because I'm not a storyteller in that way. I need a co-writer. I need a librettist or a book writer for a musical. So I throw my net out into the universe and see what comes back. And I had met this orchestrator on Broadway named Chris Yonke, who was kind of a big-time orchestrator on Broadway, who was also like a metalhead. And we talked to each other for a while, and he introduced me to a couple people that didn't really do it for me. And then I met Damian Gray. First meeting on Skype with Damian, I was like, okay, I can work with that guy.
This is my guy. This is my collaborator.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Damian promptly said, I have this idea to do something with Jack the Ripper. And I thought, pass, that's, super Spinal Tap, not interested. And then he goes, no. I want it to be like, Eric Satie in a smoky club kind of vibe. And I was like, that I can do. And it was a complete, dude, the learning curve was unbelievable. And it was the first music I'd ever written to somebody else. Well, to not only to someone else's lyrics, but that the lyrics were written first. And so I would get this giant set of lyrics or the recitative, and I would think, how does this music go? And it was very freeing because I could just write a sentence and then change the timing and write the music completely to the words. And it was really interesting. I found it super creative, and I thought to myself, wow, this is awesome. I mean, little did I know it would take me 3 years to finish it. And
musicals probably do. They take that time because first you have to have the good story. And I think you guys do have it because it's the ultimate, especially for the timing. I mean, it's weird as serendipity happens and it's just like things happen at the right time. But this is the ultimate Me Too revenge story. It's basically a story of like Jack the Ripper's first 5 victims, I believe it is, and they all come back to life from the dead to track down Jack the Ripper. Now, if that's not Me Too revenge, I don't know what is.
Yeah. It was interesting to make it about the women. So it's not really a Jack the Ripper story. It's really about the women. So,
can you name those 5 victims? Because I'm cheating because I have notes. But
oh my God. Yeah. Mary Jane Kelly, Annie Chapman.
Yeah. Damn, good one. Elizabeth Stride. Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine Eddowes.
There you go. You got them.
There's one more.
Okay. There's another Marianne Nichols, not Jared James Nichols, and Marianne Nichols, and Mary Jane Kelly. Those are the 2.
And so we have got readings going. We've had several readings. We've had it workshopped, and we have a great director, Kelly Devine, and we're getting it underway. Now, COVID has decimated the whole genre, so we don't know when we'll be able to get anything back up and running. But it was very interesting for me to have 8. There's 3 men and 5 women on the soundtrack album. So it was really an interesting project for me to write for other singers, which I'd never done before. And I found it super creative. And I also was able to marry the classical thing with the rock thing. So it was the one genre where I can put like all the things I've worked on into one one place.
Yeah, it's all in one place. If those of you that are in the chat and those of you that are listening on any sort of platform that we have right now, this is In the Trenches. You can go check out some of Kip's Wingers of. You can check it out. Get Jack at www. Why you don't even say www. That just shows my age. Getjack.com.
Yeah.
Getjack.com. You can find out more information about the musical as well. So we are sitting here in the trenches. I mean, like I said, I'm just getting started because like I said, I was very excited to do the research on this because there's so much more I feel to what you do than just your time with Winger as the band and the videos that people might see or might not see or whatever it is. That it does seem that little microcosm of time it's not your career. This is your career, is your passion. You've been talking about it all day.
Yeah, I appreciate you. It's really nice of you to shed light on that, because a lot of people think I'm like Mr. 17, and
that hasn't been an albatross, has it? I mean, that song is definitely something you couldn't do in 2020, obviously, but has it been, or has it been a door opener or a door closer?
Only for ignorant people, I think, because the song was just a fun pop song. I mean, McCartney said, well, she was just 17.
And there you got it.
With what was it, Sweet 16 by Kiss, or what
Christine
was it?
16.
Christine 16.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just, you know what, to be honest with you, I stole the title from Kingdom Come. They had a song on their album called 17. The first album.
My soundbite. There's my soundbite.
and I was out of ideas for lyrics, because lyrics are hit and miss with me, and especially back then. Yeah. And I thought, man, I need a title. Let me look at this Kingdom Come album. I was like, 17. I'll steal that.
You can't copyright a song title. I learned that from Gene Simmons.
Totally.
I was in a band called Electric Angels, and we had a song called "You Put the X in Sex," and Bruce Kulick produced our demos, and then 6 months later, Kiss had a song called "Let's Put the X in Sex." So
there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Imitation's the highest form of flattery. So
I never call it ripping it off. I call it paying homage. That's what we do.
Totally. Can't get enough.
I love it.
Bad company song.
That's true. Let the people speak. That's the segment that I want to get into, because all throughout the chat, people have been diehards. Thank you for hanging out with us and putting up amazing comments. Vic has been collecting a lot of these questions, and our first one, called from Let the People Speak for Kip Winger, is from @ribbon_bear. What's the most important lesson you have learned with Alice, playing from Alice? Have you learned any lessons? I definitely have.
Oh my God. I mean, Alice is the blue blood of our, American rock. What I learned from Alice, to be very generous. Alice is extraordinarily generous. When I left Alice, everybody thought I was crazy. And Alice was the one that said, you should totally go for it, dude.
Really?
Go do your thing. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. There it is. Alice giving you the push. Yeah. Alice and Kane.
Yeah.
Well, our next question would be from @Shuvam the Backer. And you've heard this before. Maybe, is rock and roll dead? Is it really rock and roll dead? Or
no way, dude. Rock and roll is alive and well. I mean, there's so many new bands. Young bands that are just killing it. So absolutely not. The spirit of rock and roll will never be dead. And by the way, the spirit of rock and roll is in my classical music. I mean, that's what I bring to classical music, is the spirit of rock and roll. Absolutely not. And it never will be.
I think there couldn't be a better time. You talk about these Corona times and where we are being stuck inside. There couldn't be a better time for a young band to come out with an attitude and a message.
Absolutely.
And I tell every single young band that sends me their stuff, I say, look, if you can take the attitude of whether it's a young Guns N' Roses, a young Nirvana, and who knows, a young Beatles, you take all those bands and you just get the attitude with a message, and you're going to be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it'll never die because it's in the spirit of humanity.
I love it. Well, our next question from at Farmburger at New Winger album. Well, we touched on it briefly, but what are the plans for a New Winger album being released?
Right. So Reb and I got together in December and wrote a few songs. We had put some Instagram posts out from that time. We actually came up with a couple really good ideas and a bunch of really not so great ideas. But right now we have what I could say are 4 really decent songs that reach the bar of what I'd like to put out. And then the COVID thing happened. And so now we're doing a little bit of file sharing, which I don't love. I like to be in the room with people when I make a record. So we've been sending ideas back and forth, and we're planning our next 10-day space because we normally get together in 10 days and we burn out in 10 days. So we'll get together for 10 days and see what we come up with. And then, we should be done. It should easily be out by January.
There you go. In January. Good answer. Well, you've worked with so many producers. So I understand that that lane you're taking with not liking the file sharing, because you've worked with guys like Beau Hill. You've worked with Mike Shipley.
Let's just take a minute.
Yeah.
Mike Shipley. I mean, rest his soul. Mike Shipley is the Picasso of mix engineers. There will never be anyone, in my opinion, that is as good as Mike Shipley. He was absolutely Van Gogh the guy was unbelievable. I learned how to make a record from Mike Shipley.
There it is. Mike Shipley getting high praise from
Because if you listen to the Pull album, that really is the identity of the band. Even though the first 2 records were very successful, it wasn't until the Pull record when we really found our voice, and I couldn't hear before that record. We were in the studio with Mike Shipley, and Reb would be playing these rhythms, and Mike would be going, "You're rushing," and we'd be like, "What?" And because Reb would lay down this wicked guitar rhythm, and Mike would be, "No, man, you're rushing," and I couldn't hear it, and then all of a sudden, just like that black light poster, was like, oh my God, he's rushing. And so you start to hear all these micro nuances in the music that when the ball hits the ground, boom, that's the beat. The beat's not there. The beat's not there. The beat is right when you hit the thing. It's not when you come back. And it was like, oh my God. And engineering, mix, all that stuff, I learned how to do it from Mike. So I can't praise Mike Shipley.
The early days of Pro Tools, or maybe not. Maybe
no.
Recording.
This was old school recording.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, now with the newer stuff that you just put out, because you did do one of those, COVID isolation videos, and I think we have a clip of that. Is that you producing this track?
Yeah.
The Better Days Coming, and maybe has a little bit of that, influence that you took from Mike Shipley. Maybe we can play a little bit. Go ahead.
The problem is it takes me a long time to make records because I worked with Mike. And Mike worked with Mutt Lange for, 18 years or whatever. And it's all this very precise stuff, which works for me. It's like classical music. It's like you need to know, if you put a score in front of an orchestra and you don't have the exact articulation on the oboe, you need to know that, or else it won't get performed the way you want. It's the same in music production. Now, that's not a value judgment, because a punk band that just jams out a song one time through can be every bit or more exciting. So there's no judgment on better or worse. That's just my way is what I need to do before it sits right in my solar plexus, is to get it exactly the way I hear it. And that's my way. But
Well,
that was a long-winded answer.
this video that you put out was a pretty cool compilation. Better Days Ahead. Can you talk a little bit about it? Who you involved and how did it come about? And obviously, we'll put the link up where people can see it. But we're going to play a clip of it first, and then you can talk about it. Vic, you want to play that clip?
There's a sign of a better day coming. It's your time, baby, stop running. Just feel the love, stormy weather. Yeah. And if you want to know how, like Saturday, everything's okay. Turn around, all around the world, better days coming. You're the sound, just gotta listen now. Better days coming.
Who's not in it? I'm not in it, but that's probably the only musician that isn't. Jesus. All right. Okay, Vic, thank you for playing that clip. And if you would have seen us behind the scenes, you would have seen me going, no, what's going on? But then I saw Alice on there. I mean, what was the whole idea behind the project?
So the song came out in 2015. It was the title cut of the last Winger album, Better Days Coming. So with the COVID stuff, we were trying to figure out, like, what could we do here? Let's, like everyone else is doing, let's put a thing together. And, let's do, what song would be good for this? Better Days Coming. Oh yeah, let's do Better Days Coming. Cool. And then I thought, oh my God, it'd be so cool if we could get some other people to sing on it. And so I started asking, everyone said yes. I was like, oh my God, let's turn this into. Then I started going, God, I wonder if Alice would do it. Oh my God, and then, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. Because that one line, if you want it, come and get it. I was like, only he can sing that. And then I thought, it'd be great to get Klaus. And I called Eddie Trunk and said, man, do you got a contact for Klaus? And Klaus said yes. And then, Alan Parsons and all my friends that we tour with all the time, and everybody said yes. And so we were lucky, and it was just a fun message. I mean, I was really happy with the way that turned out. It's so much fun.
So maybe we'll get that link on up there. With Vic can put it up there if anybody wants to see the entire version without me freaking out backstage saying I want to get to the next part too, because it obviously, when I saw Alice, I wanted to get to our next segment, which is something that he tells me a lot, and I don't know if he told this to you when you were on the Constrictor tours or whatever. He would always say, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So we put a segment out on In the Trenches because, as you know, that Alice does like to embellish some stories sometimes. And this segment of the show dispels rumors or myths or controversies surrounding our artist. And our artist today is Mr. Kip Winger.
It's all true.
It's all true? Okay, well, wait till I ask the questions. Okay. My first question of this, now, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, is, did Alice Cooper actually name the band Winger?
No, that's not true. Alice, I didn't like the name Winger. I didn't want the name Winger. The name of the band was Sahara. And you can see on the front of the album cover at the bottom right, it says Sahara. What happened was we were Sahara, and the record.
I can see it now. It's one of those things. I'll be honest with you, Kip. Last week, Rick Nielsen was on the show, and he told me that there was a copy of In Color in his back pocket on the album cover of Heaven Tonight. I had never seen that. Just like this right now, I had never seen Sahara on that bottom.
Yeah, so that was the name of the band, and shortly before we went to print, we got a cease and desist letter from a band called Sahara. And we were like, oh my God. And if you remember back in those days, it was like coming up with a cool band name was impossible. Nowadays it's, so many fresh and cool names, but
why is that?
And I can't remember. I think maybe the president of Atlantic said, why don't you just call it Winger? And I was like, man, I didn't like that. And every rep was bummed. And then Alice.
Can we call the band Beach?
Yeah, he wanted Winger Beach. And then Alice said, man, that's a great band name, So he did say that.
So he gave you the endorsement. He
gave me the endorsement. And when Alice said that's a cool band name, I thought, well, maybe it's cool enough,
and when you ask Alice, like that whole thing, go ask Alice. When you do ask Alice, he does give you the endorsement. It does seem automatically validated. It's cool.
It totally does. I mean, I feel really honored to be associated with the Alice camp. I mean, it's huge.
No doubt. Anybody that's part of the Alice Cooper legacy, and it's cool as how much we all sort of get along, because we all know whose name is on the marquee, and we all know that he's responsible collectively for being the guy all those years. We've had something to do with it, but
he's a very benevolent ruler, and you want to give him that. You want to support him on his pedestal. He encouraged. He makes you feel endeared to do that, which is amazing, And I suggested a lot of people for his band, Reb and Jason Hook, and
you did.
And
well, here we go. Here this becomes now. I don't want you to give anything away because it might lead into my next question. This is perfect.
Okay.
My question 2, my second question, my last question of never let the truth get in the way of a good story, is: did you, Kip Winger, actually help Nita Strauss get into the Alice Cooper band?
Yes. Yeah. I was the one that made the call. Yeah.
There it is.
So So what happened was I was talking to my accountant, business manager, Joey Minks, who manages the Donnas. And he said, wow, I just got a call from the Alice camp. They wanted Allison, the guitar player for the Donnas. They're looking for a female guitar player because Orianthe's leaving. And I was like, I know the person, because I had just met Nita and Courtney on the Monsters of Rock cruise, because I was working with a guy named Jason Green in Vegas. I'd met Jason through Rock Camp, and Jason was kind of managing them, but not, kind of like working on it. And he said, can I introduce you to them? So I met them, and when Joey told me that, I thought, I know the person to do that. So I called, I think I emailed Bob Ezrin and Shep, and I said, I think I have the person for you. And then I got Nita's contact, texted her and said, hey, I got a gig for you. And
talk about a person that was able to make the best of an opportunity.
Yeah, big time.
That is making the most out of an opportunity given. And
she totally lived up to it.
Yeah, it does live up to it day in, day out. Like I say, such a great band member to be a part, to play with night after night. I always give Tommy Hendrickson credit, Nita Strauss credit, myself, this triple guitar player. Of course, we have Chuck and we have Glenn Sobel that rounded up, but it's at the end of the day, we are the supporting cast for Alice Cooper. And
listen, I will say, in my opinion, it's the best incarnation of Alice Cooper. I've seen you guys play. It's absolutely awesome. Really, really good.
Very much, Ken. And we did not pay you for that. We did not.
No.
Nothing to do with. I'm glad we got that out though, because those two facts or fictions are the first was half true. Alice gave you the endorsement, but he didn't come up with the name Winger. Winger was there, and then you did have you gave a really good endorsement for Nita Strauss as well.
Yeah. She's a star. It was obvious that she, and I don't know what happened from the first rehearsal on, but I was definitely involved in getting her in the band. But like I say, she lived up to it. She really, she got in there and just
continues.
The thing is you can open the door for people, and it's up to them.
Yeah. That's with my experience with Alice Cooper. I do give Gilby Clarke a lot of credit, because it was
Gilby's great. I love Gilby.
It was Alice Cooper that had seen Gilby and myself play, and he said, "I like those two guys," And Gilby couldn't do it; he was still signed to his own labels. But Gilby gave me the complete endorsement. He says, "You got to go out and get this gig." And I always give Bobby from Mates credit as well, because Bobby, he's that guy hanging out. For those of you that don't know, Mates rehearsal is one of the. I'm sure Winger practiced there.
Absolutely, love Bobby. He's amazing.
So I give those two guys, and plus everybody else that ever said a good word about me in that day. But at the end of the day, like Nita, I went in there and got that gig. It wasn't.
You are 15 years later. Yeah,
interviewing you.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you live up to it. I've opened the door for a few people that didn't live up to it. I mean, it's all you can do is, and Kane opened the door for me.
Really.
Yeah, he was the one that said, "Hey, man." Well, Beau Hill, and Kane then opened the. Well, credit where credit's due. Beau called me and said, "We need bass on 4 songs for Alice. Get up here right now." So Beau gets the credit for that. Then Kane was like, "If you want the gig, tell Alice." And then you walk through the door, and then it's up to you.
Man, do you have very fond memories of those tours that you did? Because when you look back on it, it wasn't a huge amount of time. It was a finite amount of gigs. But do you have really good memories of that tour? Because it was such a massive tour.
Oh, dude, it was amazing. I mean, for me, it was a complete dream come true. I mean, I was waiting tables in Hoboken, New Jersey, 4 months before we played live on MTV for 16,000 people on that live DVD. That was the first gig we did, dude.
4 months before I got the Alice Cooper gig, I was working a liquor store in Beverly Hills. I was working at Beverly Hills Liquor. So exactly, we have very similar stories of that, and then sort of snatched out. And so your first show was that big special, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the amazing thing about Alice is it's hit after hit after hit after hit. And even the deep cuts are hits because the fans are so rabid.
And the fans have been supporting us all throughout this entire podcast today, because we have been hanging out with Alice Cooper alumni bassist Kip Winger, as well as Winger frontman. But as we have found out, a musical composer, as classic composer, as far as writing musicals, and as far as what's the next goal? Do you have anything set right now?
I don't. I'm done with the goals. There's a few pieces I'm finishing for Nashville Symphony, and finishing the records with, I want to do another Winger record, another solo, and just keep writing music as I get older. But life goals, you'll find me, later in life, you'll find me walking the streets in Paris. So, I feel pretty content right now with I don't want to go outside of what I'm doing right now. Within the things that I'm doing, I'm just going to keep working on that soup.
Nice. And as people want to get in touch with you, people want to follow you, find out more information, I'm going to have Vic put up all those links right now. If you want to just say them so the people that are listening on the audio podcast can hear as well, where do we get in touch with you, Kip?
There it is, at Kip Winger, Kip Winger Facebook, at Kip Winger, wingertheband.com. And
just Google Kip Winger and you'll find out all the stuff that you want. But at Kip Winger on Instagram right now. I hope you guys go out and support and follow right as soon as we end this podcast, because we have been having a good talk today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Ryan. It's rare to do an interview where somebody's this well informed, so I appreciate that.
You know what? It's Vic has done a great job with all the overlays and all the pictures. It's been inspiring all week to see our RGA, as we call them, the Roxie Guitar Army, been supporting you. I know that not all the not all the ads and posters might have been up to your, what you wanted exactly.
Oh,
but
no. Yeah, it's fine.
Getting more than what they expected, because you know what, regardless, it is part of our history. I have a shirtless shot of myself doing a Sun amp, that I'm going to put out. I might not use it as my current sort of thing, but the bells are tolling. That means that we have to sort of close things out with Kip Winger. Hey, everybody, thank you for another great episode of In the Trenches. We will be debuting and we will be announcing who our next guest is. But you know what? I want to savor this moment. Kip, any parting words for anybody else that's out there?
Just thank you for supporting, my music and everybody else out there. For all you people that, have been keeping the faith, we appreciate you.
No doubt. And keep on keeping the faith. All right. More Winger music coming out soon, as well as classical music from Kip Winger. And there will be another episode of In the Trenches next week. So until the next time, folks, enjoy the ride.
We'll be well.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.